Live from Texas, now known as Elon Musk's private wildlife preserve. And we're some of the wildlife. I'm Scoop Sweeney. And that over there in Galveston is John Lepkowski. Where's Elon, John? I thought he was going to join us. Wildlife preserve. And we're. Oh, you may need your earpiece.
Well, I won't even tell you what was happening. Elon Musk probably should make candles because I understand that Musk candles are very desirable.
They're big sellers in the hippie market.
All right, sandalwood too. In fact, he could change his name to Elon Sandalwood and do pretty well.
I would prefer Elon Patchouli because I'm a big fan of patchouli myself.
I like patchouli too. You know, there's people in my family that don't like patchouli.
Well, I have one of those as well. One of those is residing in my domicile as well. She wrinkles her nose in dismay when I show up with that.
So is patchouli a guy thing?
It's an old hippie thing. I don't know.
It's an old hippie thing.
Well, the jury's in. We're guilty.
Now, I recall I'd wander into places and I would smell that smell and I would think, what in the hell is that? You know? And I would just kind of like, my nose would kind of float up a little bit and I would kind of follow it along. And eventually I found that you could carry that scent with you if you just got some patchouli oil and put it behind your ears.
It is also known as Ode Stoner because people were operating under the delusion that it was going to mask the smell of that marijuana they had been inhaling for no good reason at all. It never seemed to work, but it smelled okay by my nose. Seemed to think it was smelling fine, but other people thought it smelled like crap.
You still find it though, pretty readily. There are soaps, especially that have a patchouli scent, and there are candles with a patchouli scent, but they often combine it with some other scent like lavender.
Yes, let's do some aromatherapy, John. We need to figure out how the Plutopia News Network can get involved in aromatherapy, where they were always talking about having smell-o-vision.
I don't know, some people think that aromatherapy stinks.
Yes, and there were those few ill-fated attempts at doing that with movies where they had, smell generators.
Television.
Smell-o-vision.
Television, I remember it well.
Yes, and then there was, what was the movie that had all the moving stuff? It was one of the...
That was a William Castle thing.
Yeah.
William Castle was a movie producer.
House on Haunted Hill, was that it?
Yeah, he was up for gimmicks. House on Haunted Hill was the one that had the skeleton.
That came out into the audience.
The audience, yeah.
That happened at a midnight show in our hometown.
I was a member of the William Castle fan club.
Well, I'm an admirer.
One of the conditions of being a member of the fan club was that every day at some point you had to say, William Castle is the master of movie horror. And I said it so many times that I still remember it.
You probably raised him from the dead. Yes.
That guy, he was a pretty cool guy. He actually was an inspiration for a character in a film called Matinee, which I believe was made by Joe Dante. Matinee was a film about a producer like that who comes to a little town where they're going to launch his movie, I guess, with its gimmicks and so forth. And this is at the same time that the Cuban blockade was going on, and this is like a movie theater in Florida. And I think at some point people decide that the nuclear war has started and they get locked in a vault or something. And he has something to do with that. I should watch that film again. I don't remember it as well as I should.
I remember the Cuban Missile Crisis. That was just gangs of fun. When that all happened, everyone I know in our little hometown, and you probably knew some of these characters, they were packing up their weapons and their Boy Scout knives and their tents, and they were going to head off to the mountains. I mean, mountains in Texas were a long way away. I mean, you had to really want to go there. And I've been to the Davis Mountains and Big Bend, and that's really not a vacation spot for people that aren't really into, hard time camping.
But the town where I grew up, which may be really similar to the one where you grew up, there was an air base.
Mm-hmm.
Like that where you grew up?
I believe it was the same little.
Oh, it was the same town.
Yes.
And they were scrambled. They were all being called up to fly to Florida and be on ready. And I had a science teacher. I think I was in the 8th grade. And this science teacher, Ms. Brokaw, was married to a jet pilot who was one of the guys who got scrambled, who had to haul ass over there. And I was being pretty cavalier about the whole thing. It was like I didn't really believe anything was going to happen. And she was freaking out, and she was kind of irritated with me because I was being so nonchalant. I was like suggesting that we actually were not going to have all-out nuclear war and the end of life on Earth.
Yeah, apparently you had not mastered that survival skill known as pretending to give a shit, which works.
With your teacher, that's a survival.
Well, my family story involving that is my sister's husband was stationed at Webb Air Force Base. He was a lowly airman, and he was assigned to guard duty around the fighter base, which was out there. And he was out there screwing around, as he always did, and managed to drive his Jeep into the little water hole they had there. Almost got, I think they were going to send him to the firing squad because they were pissed at him anyway. But that was our family contribution there. And
well, I have a question about that. So is it the fact that your sister married a guy and then he joined the Air Force, or did she marry one of the guys at Webb Air Force Base?
The latter there. She married a guy that was stationed there. He was from New York. He was a New Yorker. And boy, that went over well with my parents, who are dying old Southern Baptists. So
are they still married?
Hmm?
Are they still married?
Oh, no. Well, yeah, she passed away in like 73, and she was getting ready to have him killed anyway. Anyway, we won't go into that since they'll probably listen and come take a hit on me or something.
Well, we did promise to discuss politics tonight, and unfortunately, our other usual participants in this conversation are missing at the moment. They have things going on. So we don't have Susie Sheeler, and we don't have Squeamish Joy. So it's just Scoop and I. And one of the things that Susie wanted to talk about was the Texas abortion legislation.
Yeah, everybody wants to talk about that, male or female, because it's stupid.
You're right there, Marcia. So Marcia is going to come over here and talk to us about it.
Absolutely.
She's shaking her head.
Well, here, let me do my Marcia impression. No, and I don't want. She'll have me killed, and it'll all end badly.
Well, I did want to point out that there was a decision today. A Texas judge declared that legislation unconstitutional based on the Texas Constitution.
Yeah, but he didn't issue an injunction, which makes it kind of a half-ass settlement there.
And his decision was not based on the the abortion part of the law, the fact that the law was intended to stop abortions. His his problem was with the way that the law was going to be enforced.
Yeah, the
which is
posse comitatus portion.
Yeah, exactly. So we have yet another court kind of throwing up its hands with this thing. It still hasn't been heard in the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court still has not made a decision on the Mississippi law. And what those two laws have in common is that they both seek to make abortions illegal if they happen after a certain number of weeks. So I think the trick there is that they're saying, well, we're not really trying to do away with Roe versus Wade. We're just putting a limit on it.
Yeah, they want to have it be based on finding a fetal heartbeat. That's the big trigger device there, and
and that's kind of confusing because they've been throwing a 6-week figure around.
Yeah, that's the estimate.
But you don't really have a fetal heartbeat after 6 weeks, so it's questionable.
Unless you're a Republican politician who doesn't know crap about pregnancy.
You're Marsha laughing at me because I'm creating confusion. Anyway, the Mississippi legislation, if it is found unconstitutional, I think that would have that would be a signal that the Texas legislation is probably unconstitutional too. But oddly, even though there is no decision yet from the Supreme Court, based on the way the judges were asking questions, there seems to be a widespread belief about how they're going to rule, and that they are actually going to allow this limit on abortion procedures. And in Mississippi, I believe it's 16 weeks instead of 6 weeks, as it is in Texas. And if they do that, they can say, well, we're not really overruling or ruling against Roe versus Wade. We're just putting a limit on it.
Yeah, we're just cutting its legs off and tying it to a fence post somewhere. But we're not impeding Roe v. Wade. The problem with all of these court decisions, all the courts seem to be going, well, this sounds kind of bad, but oh, look, there's a UFO. And they distract. It's like, so we'll get back to you. So they just want to distract from what's really going on, which is everyone is afraid of the Trumpies, and they all want to get reelected because a lot of these judges in Texas are elected officials, or at least appointed by the elected official, the governor. So everyone's afraid.
Why do they fear the Trumpists?
They fear them because I have no idea. Because they're afraid that they might vote against them and throw them out of office, and they'd have to go get an honest job.
Well, now supposedly, and I heard this just the other day, that there are people in Congress who are afraid to, and these are Republicans, who are afraid to contradict Trump.
No.
Because they're afraid that they're going to get death threats, and they're actually afraid that somebody might actually kill them and their families. So they are kind of going along the party line.
They might use some of those guns that the Republicans are so enamored with. It's like, we can't limit all those guns, even though they may come and kill us with them. But that seems to be...
Well, that's more of a Santa Claus thing, isn't it? I mean, they're kind of hoping that Santa Claus will bring them ammunition.
Santa Claus is bringing me guns. I don't think that'll be a hit.
That's Thomas Massey and Lauren Boebert within the last week have both made it known that they want bullets for Christmas, basically.
Well, that's a two-way street there, so to speak. Be careful what you ask for. Someone may give
They
it to
might deliver
you.
the bullets at high speed. That's true.
Yes.
I don't really think that's going to happen to those people. Um, but I just wonder whether that's going to catch on.
Oh yeah, it sounds like it'll. Well, they've kind of worn the whole war on Christmas meme pretty thin. It's looking pretty threadbare. So they need something new to pump up the masses. So let's get guns for Christmas. Give me some ammo. Give me some rocket launchers. Give me a break.
But now there is some evidence of a war on Christmas because somebody did actually set fire to a Christmas tree.
Yeah, they said it was Fox said it was Joe Biden with a beard, but I don't think they were like most of their stories. It was not fact based.
Well, that fire was actually supposedly set by a homeless guy, supposedly not for a political reason.
He just wanted to get warm. I mean, that's New York City. It's getting a little chilly up there.
On the other hand, I think that if you listen to Fox, they seem to be implying that this is a left-wing plot.
But of course, they implied that bad weather was a left-wing plot. Antifa is bringing truckloads of bad weather down here and turning it loose in Republican states. That's the sort of story that actually, has some legs in some of those states, no matter how crazy it might be.
Is there actually a war on Christmas? If
Well,
so, who are the soldiers fighting this war? Who is most opposed to Christmas? And what is the Christmas that they're opposing? Because there's different ways to see Christmas. Some people think it has a sort of religious aspect that even though I don't know that anybody knows the exact date of birth for Jesus Christ, but supposedly we're celebrating the birth of Christ.
are you telling me that BC thing is not fact-based?
BC,
In
before Christ.
Yeah, because I mean, there has to be if there's a BC, there has to be an AC. I don't know.
Well, that's really just, I mean, maybe we have some idea what year Christ was born, but we don't necessarily know what day he was born. I don't think.
They didn't have calendars back then. You mean the gas stations there in that in those days didn't give out gas station calendars for the year 1 or 0?
To my knowledge, there's no real evidence that Jesus Christ was born on December 25th.
It's
You heard it here first.
and people get really nervous when you point out that a lot of the Christmas traditions are actually based on pagan traditions. All my pagan ancestors were out there doing that Christmas tree thing, and that had nothing to do with the church. That had to do with pagan celebrations of, I guess, the winter solstice.
I'm just sitting here thinking about this. So we have the nativity. We have a description of what happened at Christ's birth. There's a thing about the star and the wise men and all those things that happened. I don't think anywhere in there they articulated a specific date, but the Romans observed winter solstice on December 25th. So in Rome in AD 336, they had the first Christmas celebration, but it wasn't really Christmas. It was a celebration of the well, maybe it was. I guess it was Christmas.
Well, if it was Christmas, then there would have to be a crock. I mean, that's kind of where the name came from. Sure, it wasn't like Imprimus or Caesarmus or we're going to come and invade your countrymus. I mean, that's more of the Roman thing.
Well, I mean, I think it was the winter solstice. December 25th was the date of the winter solstice on the Roman calendar, right? So they were observing the solstice, and at some point, the religious aspect was associated with that celebration. But I don't know. I mean, I don't think any birth announcements went out, and I don't know that we actually have the exact date.
Yeah, I don't think they had any Hallmark stores in that part of the world at that time, or any part of any world.
There weren't many Hallmark cards back then.
Yes, but you know,
So we have this celebration that has come to be associated with the birth of Jesus Christ, and then that's cool. And I was raised in the Episcopal Church, which had like associated with the Church of England. We had the liturgical calendar, and we had dates specified throughout the year that were associated with the church history. Christmas was one of those dates. Easter was one of those dates. And at Christmas time, we mostly focused on the religious aspect and, talked about the birth of Christ and the meaning of the birth of Christ and, the meaning of Christ's life. We didn't necessarily talk too much about marketing, but we did, I mean, when I was a kid, we were already into this cycle of consumerism that is associated with Christmas. And that's the other thing. And it's like, if you say that there's a war on Christmas, maybe there could be a war on Christmas to take consumerism out of it and put the religious aspect back into it.
I'll sign up for that draft and join that. But I was raised in the Republican Church, formerly known as the Southern Baptist Church, and they always kind of winked. He said, "Yeah, we're not controlled by the Republicans." Wink, 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 wink. And the celebration.
You go to a midnight service every year at Christmas time?
Sort of. But the church celebrations were more religious back when I was a kid. I'm one of advanced years, and so I've seen a lot of Christmases go by. Back then, it was a little more low key. It focused, on the scriptures and stuff. But as Hallmark and many other companies got their claws on Christmas, suddenly it became this really big thing, just like any other. I remember when Valentine's Day was just a little thing, you celebrated a little bit, but then they started selling all these damn Valentine's cards, and if you didn't get one, you were a loser, and these companies would kind of let you know that fact, so you had to go out and buy yourself some cards. And all these other celebrations, holidays that used to be pretty low-key, when consumerism took over, it became a big deal, and Christmas was, the king or ruler of that whole thing. I mean, it grew from a religious celebration to this big, who ever heard of Black Friday before a certain point in time? Yeah, I don't remember that as a kid, but suddenly there was...
Wasn't there a horror movie? No, that was Black Sunday.
Yeah.
Black Friday does sound like the title for a horror movie.
Yeah, well, it's the intro to the horror movie that became Christmas. And I see that my babbling has driven you to drink, which is...
It is. I'm pouring more wine.
In my case, It's a short drive. There you go. Now,
I kept talking while I was sipping wine. Because now I'm going to talk about the war on Christmas.
there you
So
go.
the reason that the people on the right, or in the people who call themselves conservatives, whatever, the reason they started saying that there was a war on Christmas is because there was it was a sort of multicultural thing. It was an acknowledgement that not everybody is a Christian observing Christmas, that you may have Jews observing Hanukkah, and you may have Buddhists who are just sitting there, and you may have, you know, well, there's so many religions and there's so many different ways to approach religion. And out of sensitivity to people who are not Christians, there was this realization that maybe we shouldn't keep saying Merry Christmas, Merry Christmas, Merry Christmas all the time, that we should just say Happy Holidays.
Oh, no. Don't do that.
It was this, you've heard of cancel culture. Well, this was an early complaint about canceling something, canceling Christmas. The fact that you were advocating replacing the Merry Christmas phrase with Happy Holidays, that meant that you wanted to do away with Christmas. And this fed into the culture wars. And the basis for the culture war in this country that we're in right now, I mean, we're in the thick of it, is that white Christians began to realize that there were other people coming on board, and those other people were demanding to have some force within the USA. They were not necessarily Christians. They were not necessarily cisgendered, heterosexual. They were not necessarily white, obviously.
Not necessarily contributing to the Republican Party.
Yeah, the population of people who were not white, who were black or brown, was growing. And in some cases, people who are not white might outnumber people who are white. So among some people who are white and who are Christian, this created a certain amount of anxiety. And in a way, it's kind of understandable, this feeling that your existence is threatened because so many people who are different from you are starting to demand to have their right to platform or their right to power. And it's like, well, if these people get power, then that is power that I no longer have, that my guys no longer have.
Don't you think a lot of this has to do with seeing those percentage figures, and you see the white middle class figure being replaced by people of a different color, people of a different class, people from a different country?
Well, people are believed differently. So there were a bunch of us who thought, this is great. We're becoming a multicultural country, you know, where many cultures are thriving and people from different cultures can get into the seats of power. And we have, well, what you might say we have hybrid vigor, you know, based on the fact that instead of having a single race or a single religion or a single philosophy represented in the halls of power, you have many of them represented there. And that this was going to be a real strength for our country, and that it was going to be a great thing for our country. And so many of us were grown up hearing talk about how the United States is a melting pot where all these people will come together you know, and uh, we learned the ideas of racial tolerance and religious tolerance, and the idea that people can live together and work together and build something great. Well, that's not where we are right now. Right now, we have people who are really scared shitless that they're going to lose power. So they're doing whatever they can to keep power. And they know that they can't keep power in the numbers because they're outnumbered. So what they're doing instead is they're just taking power.
Mhm.
It's like, I lost that election. Well, shit, I'll just take it back.
Cancel culture there. Well,
Yeah.
you know,
We'll just
it's
cancel
odd
that
to hear these people say this because being of a Native American descent, that happened before where
You don't
those
say.
folks, the indigenous people of this continent saw these people coming in, and all of a sudden, instead of being indigenous it wasn't America, it was just this place. It was our land. These people were coming in and they were taking over and they were canceling our culture, and they saw that was just God's will. Well, it's God's will that we have these heathens out of the way because we need to build cars.
The Plutopia News Network just published a review by Felix Stalder of a book called The Dawn of Everything. Did you happen to notice that, Scoop?
I saw that, and I had to put it on my to read list because I've been playing nursemaid this week.
Well, so The Dawn of Everything is a book that was recently released. It was written by David Graeber and David Wengrow. David Graeber was also a prime mover in the Occupy movement of a few years back. I think he was the person who started the conversation about how 1% of the people are taking power over the other 99% of the people. And in this book, Graeber, who is an anthropologist, and Wengrow, who is an archaeologist, have surveyed a lot of um, more recent findings about the history of humanity, really, the human race. And one thing that they have found is that that history is kind of rigged. That history has been written to sort of diminish the contributions of indigenous people and to sort of refer to them as savages.
Dirty heathens.
Portray them as, yeah, you portray them as somehow less than the Europeans, you know, even though the Europeans were actually influenced by indigenous people and their thinking.
And they were once indigenous people in Europe.
Well, everybody was indigenous at one time or another. That's true.
In some place.
Anyway, so this book, I'm reading it. I've just started reading it. I had got through it, but Felix had finished it and written a review, which he sent to the Net Time email list, and I asked his permission to publish it on our site. It's not very long, it's a fairly short review. Certainly, there's a lot more that you could say about this book. But I really wanted to show people that we're thinking about it and encourage people to look at it, because it could be that everything we know is wrong, as the Firesign Theater used to say, and that our thoughts about history are based on bad facts.
Or no facts at all.
Yeah. So, but I really should relate all this whole conversation we're having, the label I put on it when I was creating the blurb for our weekly gathering was political syncope. And it's sort of like the opposite of political consciousness, political unconsciousness. And it is a problem, a pervasive problem within not just the United States, but the world, that most people don't really have a lot of political depth, and they're not really politically conscious. They're not really coming from a deep awareness of how they're being either helped or used or misused.
I can understand a little bit of that because a lot of people are just trying to get through the week, keep their job, keep their family happy, keep the family fed, and the time remaining after you've done all that to give a shit about politics is pretty minimal in a lot of cases. It's generally folks like me who have the time and the bandwidth to pay attention to that. But there are a lot of folks who they really don't want to hear about it simply because they're having a hell of a time just keeping the family living.
Well, I mean, and the problem is that if people don't really have an independent political consciousness that they've developed, and most people don't, and they're, this is not a put down at all. It's just that who has time really to think it through? So it's sort of inevitable that if you're going to have a politics or identify with some political movement or whatever, you just sort of glom onto something that resonates with you, and you may be going along with something that is entirely not in your interest, but you feel deeply that it is in your interest. And it could be that feeling is to some extent manufactured. So the problem that we have right now is that we have a deeply divided country where too many people are identifying with cultural and political movements that they haven't really thought through, and that they're not really being completely conscious about.
Well,
but they do feel resonance with it.
It's not necessary for them to think it through because Fox News is going to tell them what it all means and what they have to do. And if they don't do it, then they're un-American and anti-God and anti-freeze. I don't know, anti-everything.
It's not just Fox News, though. These sort of cultural platforms exist all over the place. And a lot of them, like the right, has a lot of influence right now over ordinary people who haven't really had time to think it through. But they've come to believe that the right has their back. Trump has their back. That they're going to be safer and they're going to be okay if they kind of go along with this particular trend of thinking.
On the other hand,
how much is it really a trend of thinking, and how much of it is an exploitation?
Yeah, on the other hand, the Democrats are supposed to have the backs of those other folks, but let's be serious. There are Democrats, and there are Democrats, and then there are people who are dinos, Democrats in name only, and it's hard to tell who has your back, and many times nobody has your back if you're not a good donor or a part of a voting population that they really want to attract. So it just the left has just as many strange faults as the right. I've seen a lot of progressive movements that kind of made me scratch my head like, what the hell are they talking about? Who are they trying to attract? But I mean, that's just the way politics works. Everybody has an opinion, and some of them are just fucking crazy.
Well, the Democrats haven't really figured it out, I don't think. I mean, they are not standing up for themselves very well. And the other problem is that we have a sort of media circus. The media have a lot of influence, whether we like it or not. And, there was like an interesting thing the other day, for instance, about how job growth of 200,000 I forget, per month, is it? 200,000 new jobs per month. That happened during the Trump administration, and it was referred to as robust job growth. And the same job growth, similar numbers within the Biden administration, was referred to as like disappointing.
It's a disaster for the country.
Yeah, so media can spin these things, and for some reason, they've decided to hop on Joe Biden the same way that they were hopping on Trump. And in truth, Biden has actually accomplished a lot and has done a lot for the country.
Well, statistics kind of prove a lot of things that don't really happen. If you have studied how statistics actually work and many times don't work, you can prove just about anything if you know how to weasel the data and skew it and make it look really good on a pie chart or a bar chart or some kind of chart. And I've seen some great demonstrations of people's proving the earth is flat, and they had statistics to prove it. And it's like, okay, well, take me over there and show me the edge. And it's like, oh, I'll get back to you on that.
I think I'll come up with a pie chart for Christmas dinner.
I think that.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm kind of, I guess we're both blathering about this, but really, it's a difficult time, and I'm feeling a lot of frustration myself. I'm trying to figure out what can you say to people to wake them up so that they just kind of look at what's really happening,
Yeah, that's a challenge.
It's not the left and it's not the right, but it's just what's happening. So, for instance, Biden is doing some really good things for the country right now. Trump, from my, I really did not want to become overtly political, and I've always shied away from candidate politics, but I've been pretty actively a critic of Trump. It's not because he's a conservative. It's not because he's a Republican. It's because he is a grifter.
And evil as well.
Exploiting people. And it's very frustrating to me that the people who he's exploiting won't see it or can't see it. And I don't really, I don't have the formula, I don't know how to kind of wake them up and get them to see what's going on. Democrats, are not great. They're not perfect. Republicans are not great. They're not perfect. We should just, forget about Republicans, forget about Democrats, and look at who's really being effective and who is, who does really have your back. If you think that Trump has your back, I have a bridge to sell you, because he is not there to help anyone but himself.
Well, John, the problem with politics, I decided, is caused by politicians. Now, if we could get the politicians out of the picture, then we might be able to actually get something accomplished, because a lot of the things that are being accomplished in this country are not happening in Washington, D.C., and in many cases, they're not happening in state capitals. They're happening in neighborhoods and, counties and places that have a problem, and everybody's affected by the problem. And the sane areas will come together and say, well, we really need to fix this shit. And they do. But you don't see a lot of that kind of activity in real politics. My donors said that they don't want to see any of that. So it's like, well, how many donors do you have? Oh, 3, and they gave me millions. It's like, great. So you represent 3 people. Very good. That's good politics. You're a prince among men and women. What do you think is the solution, John? How do we fix politics?
Looking for it. I'm looking for it.
You better have a flashlight and some duct tape to find that.
Well, I have moments of wanting to completely ignore the news and the news media. And then I find myself sort of dragging myself back to it and kind of digging through the stuff and trying to find um, some sense of truth about what's going on.
I hate to break this to you, but we're part of that media mess. We're contributors. We're a canker on the Bali politic.
Our friend Yasmina Chisanovich wrote a book called Diary of a Political Idiot. And I can really relate to that. We're just political idiots, right? I think that you and I have both been really forthcoming about the fact that we're political idiots. The real political idiots would try to tell you that they're pretty smart.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just not. And they're, the real problem with politics in this country right now is that the people who are in the halls of power, the people who are in Congress and in the Senate, and probably other places, I mean, Supreme Court, Department of Justice, various other divisions. Throughout the government, there are too many people who are just looking out for themselves, and they're not there to do public service. There's a lot of people who are there to do public service, and I know that they're frustrated too.
And they don't stick around because they don't have the donors backing them. You're not backing me, so you're out of the office.
Well, we have done best as a country when we have a real commitment to public service and it catches on and it's widespread. And when we have somebody who advocates for that at the top. One of the problems with Biden is that he's not, for whatever reason, he's not really a strong presence, and he's not really, I guess it's a lack of charisma on his part. He's not really firing people up. I really wish that he could fire people up.
Well, he was part of the problem for a while there. I mean, he was an old school politician back when he was doing that gig, and so he may have retained some of those bad habits. But yeah, I mean, he's doing a lot better than the previous occupant of that house there in Washington.
I really think that Snoop Dogg should run for president.
I would vote for the Snoop there. I mean, he could definitely change things up. It would probably piss off a lot of folks, but sometimes that's what you need. We need someone who's not going to just, lie to you and kiss your ass and tell you everything's going to be okay. We need some people who will actually tell some truth to you and not worry about losing those donations from the rich guys.
This might be a good time for me to mention where I've been lately.
Where have you been?
I am currently in Galveston, Texas. And this is yet another instance where we have traveled. And we have traveled during the COVID era. And here in Texas, there's no mask mandates here. There's no real social distancing mandates.
There are no mandates.
What the hell they want to do. And we've been in places, we really see probably somewhat less than 50% of the people we see are wearing masks in situations where masks might be mandated in another state. Restaurants, people are going into restaurants and of course they're unmasked. I mean, cramming that food through that mask is hard. So you're inherently going to be unmasked. Well, a lot of restaurants found ways to put people outside. And a lot of people avoided going into indoor spaces because there was such a risk of exposure. But right now, people are doing it. You know, we've done it. We've done it on this trip a couple of times. For the most part, we've worn our masks and tried to um, minimize contact. You know, I mean, we've tried to do the distancing as well as we can. Had been super hard because this is an odd time of the year to be in Galveston, Texas, and there's not a lot of people here. So we're not having to fight crowds. You know, we were able to go down to Moody Gardens and there were just a few people there. Today we went and there were a bunch of kids there. Like it looked like several elementary schools.
A field trip.
Yeah, I mean there was a large number of smaller kids there running around. So we kind of tried to distance there, and I think we were wearing our masks more in that situation than we have in some other situations where there were fewer people around. But I'm realizing that now that we have a new COVID variant, there may be a surge. And now that the weather is changing, there may be a surge. We don't really know what drives these surges. If you look at a heat map of the United States, and then you look at the COVID map of the United States, you'll see that the cases that are warmer, or the places that are warmer, are the same places where there are fewer COVID cases.
Yeah, those are the places where people are staying inside up in the cold areas. Well, you know, we spent a few weeks in a vacation kind of set. Well, it wasn't really a vacation. It was Del Seaton Hospital, and I spent all my time there. My dear wife Clarissa managed to break her ankle 3 days before Thanksgiving. And we had already purchased all this pre-made smoked turkey thing, which is now in the freezer for some other holiday. But going into Del Seaton, I have to give them a big 5-star rating as far as the people that work there. They were all masked. Everybody was masked. You don't get in that place without a mask. They have guards at the door saying, "You don't have a mask? Here, put this on." They have a big ass box of the blue masks, but yeah, at least people are wearing them when they can be seen. Yeah, I don't know if they keep them on when they get into mom and pop's hospital room, but that was a great experience. It made me really thankful that I was in a place that had a dedicated medical facility, because all those people, it's a teaching hospital, and all those people were there on Thanksgiving. I had my Thanksgiving dinner on a hospital tray in front of my wife's hospital bed, and that was fun because it was different. It wasn't just, yeah, we got the plastic turkey and, or we barbecued or something. Yeah, we were, our little family was together in a hospital room, and we still celebrated. And a lot of people were doing that. And the hospital was helping us along. The people there are really nice, and they're really talented. Carissa's had a lot of medical issues over the years and has been hospitalized a number of times. And I was always looking for a doctor. I couldn't find a doctor or a nurse anywhere when she had a problem. At Del, there were people constantly coming through, and I imagine it's part of the teaching process. There were always a doctor coming in, or a nurse, or a medical assistant, and it was constant. And it really impressed me that we have at least one facility that really gives a shit. And if you get in there, you're being well taken care of. Now, Carissa got up and walked today, and that says a lot.
There's another piece to that, which is that hospital is intended not just to be a teaching hospital, but an innovative hospital. they're looking for ways to innovate healthcare, and they're actively looking.
Yeah.
And they're also, I mean, I've spent some time down there talking to those people, and I have a background in participatory medicine where, it's like put the patient in the driver's seat. The patient, I mean, the doctor knows the medicine, but the patient knows his or her own body. So the patient should definitely be a partner in the healthcare
Yeah.
process.
And you have to have someone there to lobby for the patient. Sometimes if the patient is, not in any shape to really stand up for themselves. And that's kind of why I was there. Is, if Clarissa wasn't able to speak up when she was medicated, I made sure there was I was there to say, let's talk about what you're doing here. And people need to do that. You need to have someone to stand in there with you if you can.
Yeah, every time. And if you have a relative that is in a nursing home, somebody needs to be there with them at least much of the time, part of the time. That's not always easy to do, but people do much better in those facilities if they have advocates on board.
Yeah. Yeah, I've actually camped out in a few of the local hospitals, Seton on 38th Ave or 38th Street. When Clarissa had her breast cancer surgery, they brought me a reclining chair, which wasn't all that comfortable, but I was there, the whole time, and it made a difference. And I saw a lot of people that, they'd check mom or dad in there, and then they're off to go shopping. It's like, no, this is your family. You need to stick with them and make sure that someone is going to advocate for their treatment.
Well, and you can't just assume that a nursing staff and a hospital staff that have a number of patients to care for are not going to be 100% spot on all the time. I mean, they need your help.
You have to be like a football referee. You have to throw the flag on them occasionally if they're out of bounds, or if they're out of the bounds of propriety. You have to be able to step up and say, "No, you shouldn't be doing that to my whoever it is."
Yeah, my significant other.
Yep.
Mom.
What? Now, Marcia is speaking up back here. What'd you say?
Tell them about your mom and what we discovered just accidentally.
So I was there with her. We were taking turns spending time with her and making sure everything was okay. And I was with her one day, and she seemed to be fidgeting around a lot. She was intubated, so she couldn't really. No, she wasn't in a coma. She was intubated, and she couldn't really tell me what her problem was. But she was, she was clearly uncomfortable, and she fidgeted around for a while. And I leaned in at one point, and I put my hand on the bed, and it was ice cold. She was on a thermal bed, and they had it on an ice cold setting. I don't even know why that setting exists, but that thing
insane.
And I called the nurse and I told him what was going on. I said, "Oh my God, we're so sorry," But if I hadn't been there, and if I hadn't just happened to notice, she would have been like that for who knows how long.
Yeah, and that's not an uncommon thing. I mean, it really points to the fact that you really need someone who's going to watch out for people who are not able to watch out for themselves. So
which would be like me. I could barely watch out for myself. And here we are at the very end of our hour.
Yeah, your muffin's ready too. So go take that out of the oven there. I hear the alarm. But John, thank you so much. That was a lot of fun. And give my regards to Galveston, my favorite island in South Texas.
We'll be back on the ground next week, and we'll be doing Radio Free Plutopia, and we'll be doing this again.
We'll just be having gangs of fun. And thank you, Marsha, for letting him come on and babble with me. And thanks for chipping in on this.
Right on.
Well, later, Tater.
I will see you, sir.
You can follow the Plutopia News Network at plutopia.io. On Facebook, go to @Plutopia News. On Twitter, it's @Plutopia. With John Lebkowski, I'm Scoop Sweeney. This is the Plutopia News Network, 20 minutes into the future.